In addition to some very strong senior pastors, from 1931 to 1961, LABC was blessed with some profoundly gifted assistant and associate ministers. The first of these was Carl E. Dawkins. While in seminary at RTS from 1928 to 1929, he worked at Grace Methodist Episcopal Church in Rochester, New York, and following graduation, he married Mary Louise Spangler. Just prior to the wedding, he accepted a call to First Baptist Church, Canisteo, New York. And then, in January of 1936, he resigned his position at Canisteo to accept the call to become assistant pastor at LABC, where he served until the end of 1938. It was in March of 1939 that he took the pulpit at Drexel Hill Baptist Church in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. By 1949, while at Drexel Hill, the Dawkins family had grown to include 4 children. And in 1953, construction at a new location began on a new church building in Drexel Hill. Our final record for Reverend Dawkins was him continuing to serve as pastor at Drexel Hill Baptist Church in 1957. All 4 children are grown, including college or having graduated from college. The next of these leaders was Earl Gross, who grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. His parents were active members at the First Baptist Church of Sioux Falls, and it would be the Sioux Falls Church that would ordain him to Christian ministry. Upon graduation from high school, he spent his first 2 years of college work at Iowa State University, after which he transferred to Sioux Falls College back in his hometown. In the spring of 1940, he graduated from CRDS and immediately accepted a call to become the assistant pastor at LABC. And at the end of his first year at LABC, the pastor, Reverend Dr. Yapel, resigned his position, and Earl stepped in to lead the church for the next 10 months until Reverend Watkins arrived as senior pastor. When he graduated and came to LABC, he was 29 years old, having interrupted his educational path several times to work with youth, young boys in particular, as well as some business opportunities. In 1943, he resigned his post at LABC to accept the call to become pastor at First Baptist Church in Painted Post, New York. From Painted Post, he accepted the pastorate at the First Baptist Church in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, where he served from 1947 to 1950. And after Lansdale, he served at the First Baptist Church of Washington, Pennsylvania for 9 years, from 1951 to 1960. It was then in 1961 that he moved to Bluffton, Indiana, to take the pastorate at First Baptist Church in Bluffton. In 1965, Reverend Gross left Bluffton to return to New York State, having accepted the call to pastor the recently merged Federated Church of Ulysses. He was the first pastor of the newly formed church, which was a merger between First Presbyterian Church and First Baptist Church of Trumansburg. At age 63, he passed away. He was found dead in the parsonage of Addison, New York Baptist Church, where he had been serving for the past 2½ years. Next in the line of leadership was Stanley Borden, who was born in Toronto, Ontario, but grew up in Waterbury, Connecticut. He was a graduate of Acadia University in Canada and received his theological training at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. While he was in seminary, he was a student minister at Madison Avenue Presbyterian Church in New York City and for 2 years at First Baptist Church in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Reverend Borden came to LABC in 1947 from the Federated Church at McLean, New York. Stan, as he was fondly called at LABC, brought with him a broad experience in youth ministry, vacation Bible school, and youth camps. He also came with his talented wife, who was a graduate of Coe College at Cedar Rapids, Iowa, having majored in organ. She was also a graduate of Union School in sacred music. It was in 1952 that he resigned his position at LABC to accept a similar position with the First Baptist Church in Oak Park, Illinois. By 1958, he and his family had moved to Ames, Iowa to assume the senior pastor position at First Baptist Church. While in Ames, he was influential in social justice issues, and in 1961 they opened the first nursery school in Ames. They were also engaged in the establishment of the Northcrest retirement community there. These are only two of the long list of community engagements that was influenced by Stanley. By 1970, the Bordens left Ames to accept a pastorate at Trinity Community Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and in a letter dated 1993 to the LABC pastor Peter Carmen, Stanley indicated that he was serving as the part-time associate pastor at First Baptist Church, St. Paul, Minnesota. Jeffrey Livingstone was born in June 1886, and he was educated at the Mount Hermon School for Boys in Mount Hermon, Massachusetts. In 1919, Jeffrey enrolled at Hillsdale College in Hillsdale, Michigan, graduated in 1923 with his BA degree. He was also awarded a DD degree in 1941. Although he had been confirmed Episcopalian, he eventually joined a Baptist church in Pottonskill, New York, where there he married Wilhelmina Bauer. After graduating from CRDS in 1926, he served a variety of churches in Harrisburg, New York, Mayville and Grant, Michigan, Lockport, New York, from 1924 to 1936. And then he served at Parcells Baptist Church in Rochester, New York, from 1936 to 1952. In 1952, Reverend Jeffrey Livingstone was called as assistant pastor at LABC. And in 1954, when senior pastor Jeffrey Watkins resigned his position, Jeffrey served as the interim pastor for 4 months until George Hill was called. While still serving as assistant pastor at LABC in 1958, he died on February 24th. Charles Thunn was born in 1903 in Middletown, Ohio. Having taken his elementary education in the public school system, he entered Doane Academy in Greenville, Ohio. Doane Academy was part of a Denison University, serving as a preparatory school for college. After receiving his Bachelor of Philosophy from Denison, he enrolled at the Rochester Theological Seminary in 1929 with a Bachelor of Divinity. Mr. Thunn did additional studies at Cincinnati University, Union Theological Seminary, and clinical training at the Miami Valley, Ohio State Hospital and the New Jersey State Hospital. Charles then moved to Minneapolis to serve at Temple Baptist Church for the next 9 years. In Minneapolis, he founded a weekly radio program sponsored by the Council of Churches, and at the same time, he founded a boys' community club, which grew to over 600 members. It was from Minneapolis that he then accepted a pastorate at First Baptist Church in Ottumwa, Iowa. There he formed the Personal Problem Clinic, which was staffed by himself, another pastor, and 18 professional men and women, and the services were free to any and all. In July of 1958, Lake Avenue Baptist Church called Reverend Charles Thunn to serve as associate pastor. In the church archives, we hold a number of articles that speak to the impact in ministry that he had while here in Rochester. In 1970, Charles retired from active ministry and moved to Florida. He died on September 26, 1965. It is possible to see that from 1931 to 1961, LABC has had a number of very impactful assistant and associate ministers, and for that we have been blessed.